What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Audiophiles Podcast.
Now, I'm Malik, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined here today with Knox, one of the smartest experts in the business music field there is. We were so lucky to have Thomas Brunet, the composer for Chants of Sennaar,
Which we covered back in episode 2.
Oh yeah, just a few weeks ago. It was so great to have him on.
We replied to his comment, and we said, do you want to talk about your work on the show a bit? And we're so excited to show it with you. Welcome for our first Composer Spotlight, Mr. Thomas Brunet.
This perspective is really important. We sure have a lot to gain from talking about music in games. A lot of people ask questions because they generally don't know what we're doing. And I think it's fascinating to have a platform to explore this. And we're talking hours and hours of soundtracks sometimes, so years of research, and there's a lot to unpack.
Interesting to me, though, that you use the word research there.
There's a lot of research involved. Although the brief I received was so precise in a way that the research was made easy by the fact that Julien and Thomas, the developers, really knew what they were doing and what they wanted from the start. So there was, as you know, 5 different groups in this tower, which all have had their different specific cultures. Everything in the game derives from these cultures, like the puzzles, the languages, the glyphs, the music, instruments. So I guess the research was then a question of how do we invent something that would sound like what these cultures would come up with in a musical sense, and also sound like it's been there for thousands of years. And then obviously follow the instructions, very precise instructions.
Right.
Although I never felt restrained by the developers or the brief or anything like that. It was very, very comfortable for me.
I'd love to learn more about that brief that you got.
We really wanted to give each level its own character and its own sound. Also underscore in the sense that sometimes you get this little suspenseful, almost sound designy kind of pads. And as you noted, sometimes the music doesn't really use themes or melodies or anything like that. It's more like motives that appear, disappear, and reappear. It's basically like some kind of great textile that just was ripped at some point in time. And then you can recognize the pattern that was formed before the rip happened. So this is what we went for, basically using a different color palette for each of these levels, and then try to make them as coherent as possible. Because
when you say a color palette, are you talking about, obviously each level has a distinct visual color palette, but there's also a distinct musical color palette?
Exactly, yeah. Color could be what you would say the first people from in English.
The devotees?
More religious ones. Devotees,
yeah.
Yes. Devotees use way more string instruments and almost nothing else. You could hear the same motive played on the strings and on the flutes, depending on which level you are, but the color is different, like the musical color. It's useful because we wanted to express that these people used to know each other and talk to each other, and they cannot anymore. They can't understand each other anymore.
So you were consciously trying to portray the main theme of this game through the score.
Yes. Like what I think music should do, that's a grand statement, but what music could do in the best circumstances is to say something that the rest of the game couldn't really say, because you don't want to say it outright, because the basis of the game is you have to use your own observational skills and skills of deductions to understand the world, because nothing is explained to you. So a lot of things are explained through puzzles and even the shape of the glyphs. But then the overarching story of this tower and these people, you could observe the sculptures on the wall and get a sense of this. But then the music comes and confirms it. Although it's I guess it's mostly subconscious at this point. You don't really click that, oh my God, this is the same motif as the devotees used, and so these people used to be linked. I don't think you would make this kind of deductions unless you were clearly a musician or looking for this in the music. But I think it is felt more than observed, I guess.
So what is that process like?
Well, what I did was ask the developers outright what's our resource budget involving, assets.
Right.
What kind of musician can you animate? What kind of instruments can you put in the world? So,
and when you're talking budget, just to be clear, we're talking in game dev budget. We're talking about resources being computing power, not money here.
And
right.
Also production capabilities, because there were like basically 3 people did the entire visual part of the game, and most of it was Julien, which was my direct, how do you say it? He was my boss in terms of musical composition.
So, sorry to sidebar on this for a second, but I wanted to know, how did you come to get this job? How did you get connected with Julien? Are you part of the studio, or is it a contract basis?
So I am a freelancer. I think you would be hard pressed to find a lot of in-house composers. Like, I know Riot has some. Bungie used to have a composer, but then the huge majority of us are freelance or have their own production companies or similar systems like that. And what happened to me with Chants of Sennaar is like, it never happens. Basically, they found me on Twitter and they saw a post, and that's to say the importance of when you're an independent artist like that trying to find work, the importance of showing your work online and also communicating, being part of the discussion around the area where you live, because that's when you're going to meet people face to face, and that's where relationships happen.
Right.
And everyone knows Williams and Spielberg are doing most of their films together, and the same kind of relationships can be built in games, I guess. And what we did with Rundisk was really, from my point of view, with this kind of relationship where you will want to keep working together as long as possible, and in the best way possible. So they found me on Twitter. They looked at my post and they listened to my music, and they found that I was making very specific different types of music they were looking for. And they had this document, this spreadsheet with all the different musical cues they needed with emotional descriptions.
Wow, so you've got a very detailed brief.
Yes.
Which is not always...
No. It was really comfortable, as I said, because Julien is also a musician and he's been artist for decades now, so he knows, and a freelancer, so he knows how to speak with us. I had this insanely detailed brief, and then I had references, and then even if I wanted to kind of break this, I still could do it, and he would say, well, that's not what I thought, but let's keep it. It works. It's nice. It was really an ideal situation.
So you found the team really easy to work with.
Yes. I guess it's also a matter of size. Like 2 people doing the entire game is way less open to confusion and quid pro quo. And, communication in a big team can be a huge part of your time.
Have you worked on some projects with larger teams and appearances?
Now I'm working on a somewhat bigger project. If you want to be as efficient as possible, you need to know, I guess, 2 or 3 people in the team and have them answer your questions, because otherwise you'll just get lost in like digital paperwork and phone calls. But then when you're just working with 2 people and one of them programs the entire game and the other one does 99% of all visuals, it's easy to find answers to a question.
Thank you again, Mr. Brunet, for hanging out with us. That was so much fun. The Audiophiles is a movement of people dedicated to elevating the stature of video game music,
And we're really, really excited to have your support. And until next time, play
with sound.